So the next data source I want to talk about is the Historical Housing Unit and Urbanization database. This was developed by some friends of mine at the University of Georgia in the geography department. And what it does, it's a really great resource to kind of track how the number of housing units in your community has changed from 1940 to the present. And it does this at the tract level. And if you know anything about tracts, they change over time. And so this research team at the University of Georgia used some really whiz-bang stats to normalize all of these tracts to modern day tract boundaries, and then to track TRACK, that data over time. And so in order to access the file, I've included the link in the takeaway files. So here's the file tab. We'll go here. We'll find the CSV. It's usually the easiest one to work with, and we'll download that. We'll open it up, and we'll extract the zip file. Wide data is typically easier for folks to work with here, so I would recommend opening that one. And then if you go back to the OSF site, you can also download the data dictionary as well, so you can know what exactly you're getting yourself into with this file. It's a bit large, it takes some time to open up. But once it opens up, so here we are confronted with a bunch of numbers. This is for every tract in the United States, which you are probably not interested in analyzing. So the easy way to get to just your community is just to filter, so we can filter by state. So we're going to look at my hometown of Lima, Ohio again. We're going to do Ohio. We're filter to Allen County, easiest way. And then once we get our filter, we'll go to special, select visible cells only. So we'll only select the cells that include Allen County. Create a new file. And so there we've got our data ready to analyze. And so now if you've got ArcGIS on a desktop version, I'm sure you're well aware you can import this file into ArcGIS. You can join it with a shapefile, and there's a ton of analysis that you can do in ArcGIS on the desktop version if your agency does have that. However, if your agency does not have it, luckily the authors of the shapefile have actually put the data into ArcGIS Online as a layer that you can download and add to your map. So we're going to switch over here to ArcGIS Online. I've already logged into my account. You click the map button at the top, which will open a new map for you, which is kind of the first step in creating something online that's going to be accessible to your communities. And so in order to access this public file, we go over here to the Content tab. Excuse me, we go over here to the Add tab. We search for layers. We're going to search for ArcGIS Online. And if you remember, the name of that file is the Historic Housing or Urbanization Database 10. So you see it saved right here, which is very convenient, at the plus sign. And it'll add it for the entire United States. But of course, we're only interested in Allen County, Ohio, which is where all of my examples today are going to be from. So we'll zoom into Allen County. You can also use the search bar up here. Sometimes that occurs a little faster. And while we're here in ArcGIS Online as well, what I'm going to nab is a county shapefile, because this includes data for all of the United States, and it's you're unable to just filter out the county that you want. I like to add just a county kind of boundary file, just in order to kind of orient the viewer, even though you do have base maps as well. And so we'll make this a little nicer. So you say counties, so you click on this link that opens the symbology for ArcMap online. Click on symbols, if it'll let me. There we go. So fill here, we don't want any fill, and then we're just going to put a black outline. And there we go. So now we've got our historic housing counts here. Hit OK. Done. Still done. And so once again, we can open up the symbology. And so you can see that the folks who added this file to ArcGIS Online already very conveniently put in very nice names for all of the variables in here. So you're not going to have to do a lot of analysis that way, or a lot of renaming variables, which if you've used ArcGIS Online, you know that can take some time, and it's really a chore. So what we'll be interested today is housing unit change from 1940 to 2019. So for each tract, what this shows, and you can see this in the data dictionary as well if you do download it and open it, what it shows is how many housing units have been added or subtracted between 1940 and 2019. So you can see ArcGIS pops up with a default color scheme, which usually works pretty well. Sometimes I like to just go in and check. Seems fine. One thing I do often will increase the transparency a little bit so people can get oriented. A little bit easier, they can see through that layer to the underlying geographic features a little bit better. So we can hit done. The other thing on ArcGIS Online that's important is to consider your base map. So by default, it defaults to the topographic, which I'm not a huge fan of necessarily, but these are really up to you. My general recommendation is choose one that's not too obnoxious, but that helps orient your viewer to your community. I tend to like the newspaper map. It's a newer option that they've put in, but again, this is really a you choice, whatever you think works best. So now we've got our layer here, and what it's showing, you can see we can pop down the legend, is housing unit change from 1940 to 2019. Sometimes I'll rename this file just to be a little bit easier to understand. Okay, that's very done. It's well done. And so the next thing that you want to do, and this is something that if you're using ArcGIS Online or if you're familiar with ArcGIS Online, it can be a chore, but it's something that you really have to consider, are your pop-ups. So the nice thing about ArcGIS Online is that it's all interactive. It allows your user to click on things, to zoom in, to zoom out, and to analyze data that way. But what I see with a lot of maps is people kind of default to ArcGIS's default pop-up, which you can see this is a lot of information that your viewer, whoever that viewer is going to be, quite frankly doesn't care about. And so let's go into the pop-up tool. So you click on these three dots here, and you go to configure pop-up. So we're going to change our title, so to housing unit change. Display a list of field attributes, that's okay, but what it's going to default to is always including every single attribute you have in your shapefile, which by and large you're not going to care about. So the easiest way to uncheck a lot is to just click this display button up at the top, and then unclick it, and then by default it changes all of them. So housing unit change, so we'll include that. We'll include a 0 decimal space and include the separator for 1,000. Let's put in the 1940 housing counts. We'll put 0 decimal places. And let's put in the 2019, so folks know where we start and folks know where we ended. We'll include the 1,000 separator there. One of the things that I really like to do in ArcGIS Online, particularly with this type of data where it shows change over time, is that you can also add in your pop-up figures. So you don't need to just have numbers. You can include things like pie charts, bar charts, but you can also include, which I really like for this because again we're going to show change over time, is a line chart. So we can rename it here to change in housing units. You can never say the title too many times. And so what we can do is we can include all of these housing counts for each decade. So 1940 all the way up to 2019. And what we'll do is it'll show a line chart. So normalize, we don't care about that. So then we hit OK. And then let's test it out here. So you can see here, housing unit changed 1940 to 2019. So this tract here added 2,823 housing units. You can see in 1940 there were 314 housing units, and in 2019 there were 3,137 housing units. And then right here we've got this really nice line chart. And not only that, but when you hover over the dots, it gives you the exact numbers for each decade. So you can see between 1970 and 1980, this tract experienced a lot of growth. So if we went into that tract today, we'd assume that most of the housing units were built in the 1970s. You can see growth has kind of flatlined since then. Meanwhile, if we go to downtown Lima, like a lot of downtowns and smaller communities, you can see the number of housing units has actually decreased by 1,000. So in 1940, there were about 2,000 housing units in this tract in downtown Lima, and today there's only 1,000. So you can see right here, there's been a kind of a slow and steady decrease over time. Okay, but let's say you don't have ArcGIS Desktop for your organization, but you still want to analyze that historic housing data. So luckily, the folks who publish that data online have also included it as a ArcGIS layer for ArcGIS Online that's very easy to import into your map and to analyze or to include with any other data that you have. So right now I'm going to show you how to do that. So when you go to your ArcGIS Online site, so you click on the map button, and this will open up a new map for you. So the first step you want to do is you want to go to Add, and you want to search for layers. And you want to search for ArcGIS Online layers. And then we're going to type in the name of that data set. And we're going to click the plus button, and this is going to add it. Now the slightly inconvenient thing is it's going to add it for the entire country. So it's going to take, one, a while to load, and two, if you do any publishing of this data in terms of an online web app or some type of interactive website, you're not going to be able to just filter out your county unless you have a paid ArcGIS Online membership. The other thing that I want to do, because this is nationwide, is I'm going to add a U.S. county shapefile just for the boundaries of the counties, which I found are usually pretty helpful for folks to orient themselves and to understand kind of where they're located and where they're looking. So we're going to zoom in to Lima, Ohio, which is where all of our examples today are going to be focused on. It's going to take some time for this to load because there are, again, quite a few tracks nationwide. So we'll click up on here in Details, Content. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to knock out kind of county outlines. I don't care about filling in the counties, so I want people to be able to see under them. So there. So now we've got just county outlines, and we've got all of our data. That's visible. So now let's go to this tract level change map. So you can always click on these three shapes. So the default here, which is what we're going to stick with today, is the housing unit change data. Options, just to look at the symbology and how it looks. I think this looks pretty good. For now, of course, you can also, when you access this data, you can also look at the attribute table. You can see the legend here. There's many things that you can do. And so right here, in about 5 minutes or less, I've got the data that we just looked at online in a map. And if I wanted to, I could save this, which is always a good idea. Housing unit change. Add a tag, and save it. I could share, I can make it public. Bing, bang, boom, less than 5 minutes. I've got data, I've got an online site, it's interactive, it's great. However, we can make it better and we can make it much more impactful. So one of the great things about ArcGIS Online is it's very interactive. It allows folks to zoom in, it allows folks to zoom out, and it allows folks to click on things, which is always dangerous when folks can click on things. So by default, the pop-up is very informative. So this is what ArcGIS Online calls a pop-up. It is by default very informative in that it's going to show you all of your data and all of your values, which by and large your reader, your interactor, whoever is going to be seeing this map doesn't care about. And so kind of the hallmark for me of a well-constructed ArcGIS Online map is someone who's gone in, configured the pop-ups, and made them look professional, which I think is really what we're all trying to do. So the first thing I'm going to knock out is I'm going to remove the pop-up from this county map because we don't care. People know in general what their county is. They don't need to see, they don't need to be reminded, and this county shapefile probably has its own data that is liable to pop up that we're not going to care about. So we've knocked that out. We've gone to remove pop-up for that. So for the housing data, what we're going to do is we're going to go to configure pop-up. So it's going to pop up here, pop up with the pop-up information. So the title, you can never, in my opinion, say the title of your map too many times and just bang people over the head with what your map is trying to communicate. So here we've got housing unit change. So by default, like I said, it's going to show all of these field attributes, and it's going to show all of them. So let's go to configure attributes, which is how we can decide what attributes to show and what attributes not to show. And the easiest way to knock all of them out, instead of having to go in and manually click them, is to just click this display button at the top once. It'll turn them all on. Click it twice, it'll turn them all off, which is really great. So let's go here. So we've got housing unit change. So we want to display this. So 0 decimal points, and let's use the thousand separator because it looks more professional. So that's the change from 1940 to 2019. So let's also show the 1940 housing counts. Let's round to 0, use the separator. And let's show the 2019 counts. 0, and let's also use the separator. And now you might be saying, well, why don't we show all of these? Which you certainly can, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a you choice. However, there's another thing that ArcGIS Online can do that I think looks a bit nicer and looks a bit more professional, and that is that you can actually include charts in your pop-up. So it can not just be a table of numbers and text. You can include charts like bar charts, pie charts, or for this, because we're showing historic data over time, I think a line chart would be really great. So we're going to go down here to pop-up media, and click add. We're going to click a line chart. So we're going to put the title in one more time because you cannot bang people over the head enough with that. And so let's click all of these decades housing counts. 2000, 2010, 2019. Okay. So now we've got kind of our basic numbers up here, so folks are going to be able to see those numbers. But then what we've got down here is a line chart that's going to show those attributes over time, that change in housing unit count over time. So let's click OK. And it's always important to test out the pop-up because I've been doing this for a while and you never really know what's going to show until you test it out. So we can see here housing unit change. So we've got housing unit change 1940 to 2019. So you can see in this tract they added between these years 751 housing units. In 1940 they had 770, and in 2019 they've got about 1,500. And you can see right here, here's the line chart, shows change over time. And not only that, when your user hovers over a dot, it'll say what that is. So 1940, 770, 1950, 932 roughly. You can see how it increases up to 1980, and it's been relatively flat since 1980. So you can see the big growth here occurs between 1960 and 1980. Conversely, we can look at downtown Lima, which, like a lot of downtowns and communities across the country, has lost housing. So between 1940 and 2019, they lost roughly 1,000 units, from about 2,000 in 1940 to 1,000 in 2019. And you can see the housing units downtown actually peaked in 1960, about 2,600, and then fell pretty precipitously up to the present day. So again, right now we've got a very professional looking ArcGIS Online web map. Something that, again, you can save, very important. You could share, you could make this public. Here's your link. Put the link in your planning documents, put the link in a website if you're doing a planning website. Easy peasy, done. If you want this to look a bit more professional though, you can always create a web app. And the basic web app in ArcMap, I find it's basic sounds like a pejorative, but it really does a great job of showing this. So we're going to create a web app. Housing unit change. We're going to click create web app. So if you haven't created a web app recently, ArcMap has changed the interface slightly for this, but it's still pretty intuitive. So we've got our housing unit change map, easy peasy. Include a header. The defaults are usually pretty good for this. The screenshot's always nice. Layer list, search open at start, fine. But again, none of these are mandatory. It's just kind of your own personal preference. Let's go dark mode. And then we're going to hit publish. Are you sure you want to publish the app? Yep. Changes have been published. And so here we've got a link. We can copy the link. We've got an embed link. We can share it on any type of social media. We're going to hit the launch button. And voila. In less than 10 minutes, we've got a housing web app. Shows housing unit change. Again, very similar to what we saw in the basic viewer. I think it looks a bit more professional. But we've got here housing unit change. We've got a table. And we've got a really wonderful line chart that, again, will show you the change in housing units over time. And of course, for community planning, what we're seeing in this tract is they added a lot of housing units between 1970 and 1980, but they haven't added a lot since. And so if we knew of any housing problems, for instance, in older homes from 1970 to 1980, a lot of split level homes, not great for aging in place, that's something that we can incorporate into our planning efforts. So again, this is just kind of a really easy tutorial for showing you how to do historic housing unit counts data, which is a new data source and I think is really powerful, and how to create just a basic ArcMap viewer that can be embedded in a website, can be shared on social media, or can just folks in your community can access to better understand housing conditions in their community.